West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Now, for the first time, we're actually learning about backroom dealings at the highest levels of that losing president's campaign and Fox News, who you just heard make that call. And we're only learning about this because of the effective billion-dollar case against the Fox empire, which we and other media have been covering because it's a huge deal. Fox News founder Rupert Murdoch cites the Arizona call, what I just showed you, as a defense. To argue, he says that the channel reported Trump's loss accurately, which in that moment, on that day, with regard to Arizona, is true. This is what Murdoch says under oath. He always doubted the fraud claims, adding, "We thought everything was on the up and up. I think that was shown when we announced Arizona." Murdoch invoking the clash over the Arizona call to try to defend Fox's independence. And he's also blowing the whistle in a way on an apparent effort by Jared Kushner, with Trump yelling in the background. An effort to press Fox into, I guess, what they hoped would have happened instead, to delay or lie about the results to help steal the election. Here are the new details on Murdoch's testimony, which detail Kushner calling, blasting the terrible Arizona call as Trump could be heard, his voice in the background, shouting. Now, one might wonder why Fox, which bended so much to Trump that they're facing this credible defamation suit, is suddenly blowing the whistle on him and on his son-in-law's apparently lying antics. Well, I'll tell you right now, this is Murdoch's strategy. He moves and pivots. He's got a whole HBO media titan character in succession based on him, based on Murdoch, for those same wily traits. Now, this isn't just some random campaign war story. This is Murdoch on Murdoch, a story by Murdoch that serves Murdoch's current interest in this case, which is to try to present Fox as some sort of numbers-based truth-telling outlet which stood up to Trump. Now, let me be clear. That may be what happened about Arizona. It may be a true exchange. Indeed, it would be pretty dumb for Murdoch to blatantly lie under oath in a trial about his company's lies. But this is also designed to tell a certain piece of the story, and that brings us to the next passage. Again, I told you, as we get this new information, we'll be going through it with you, and this stuff's pretty interesting. Murdoch then relates in this new deposition testimony what he says is his own resistance, describing his own kind of iron, independent backbone. Murdoch telling Kushner, quote, "The numbers are the numbers." Okay. Until they weren't. Because let me be clear and let me be as fair as possible. Had Fox News held that line about the numbers over the following months, there wouldn't be any strong defamation case over lies. There wouldn't be any of this. And, perhaps ironically, because stories do tend to repeat themselves in a way, the arrogance, the way people think they'll never get caught, there wouldn't be, without the change, all these leaked texts and new deposition quotes about top people at Fox to the top of the company. But instead, here we are. company facing this legal earthquake. Aftershocks that range from the cancellation of the Big Lie host, Lou Dobbs, to the Murdoch deposition that's been hitting the papers, as I'm reporting tonight, to these open questions about whether the company will end up paying over $1 billion in punishment. So yes, Murdoch says he told Kushner, the numbers are the numbers. And the numbers led the coverage on that day Trump lost Arizona. I'm telling you that because it's true, and we saw it in public, and in all fairness, on that day, they were accurate about Trump's loss in that state. But that didn't last. The ensuing coverage kept pushing lies about Trump's loss and lies about voting machine companies, and these broad attacks on the entire election's legitimacy, which we know helped feed an insurrection, based sometimes on things like a nonsense source of Trump lawyer Sidney Powell, who told Fox in advance they were going to present a story based on what they learned about voter fraud through someone who says they learned about it via time travel and communing with a ghost. Well, as we say on the news, this ain't Rick and Morty. You can't just say you're traveling through time and dimensions to get your stories. Believe me, this show would come together a lot quicker if we did that. And Rupert Murdoch knows that too. He says under oath, he admits it now. Fox hosts, some of them endorsed that stolen election lie. They didn't just reference it. They didn't just fact check it. They endorsed it long after he had previously said the numbers were the numbers on Trump's loss. Murdoch conceding they pushed crap like this.
Texas rejected using Dominion software 3 times, raising concerns that the system was not safe from fraudulent or unauthorized manipulation.
The election results in several battleground states continued to be under intense focus as allegations of voter fraud are being investigated.
Whether it's Dominion, EBS, whatever the company, voting machine company is, it is the most ludicrous, irresponsible, and rancid system. This is an assault on the core of a democracy.
Many Americans do not believe that this election was fair. I feel that way. Dominion voting machines, they were used in all of Georgia's 159 counties, a state with a razor-thin margin.
Murdoch handicapping his own hosts, throwing some of them basically under the bus, how they lied about Trump's loss. And these increasingly desperate Trump lawyers and Fox enablers needed a story beyond just emoting that they didn't like that everything showed Trump's loss, including their own Fox election desk at one point. So they needed a thief. They needed an enemy. And as you heard there, they often turned on Dominion, which was previously considered a pretty obscure voting company brand name. And it found itself suddenly on the other side of two of the most powerful, loud, and aggrieved forces in the nation in late 2020. This losing president who would go on to invite his followers to come to Washington, where they very infamously stormed the Capitol, and these rabid set of teammates at Fox. Now, this new 200-plus page filing by Dominion is damning because of the evidence, not opinions. Opinions don't get you anything in court. It's what they've gathered. When Murdoch is pressed on how the coverage went beyond just interviewing or fact-checking, which is, of course, part of journalism, even about lies or intense claims, he admits it was more than that. It was a platform. And he conceded, well, you've shown me evidence and material in support of that. Fox chief admitting the network basically was part of platforming and supporting and endorsing those lies. Now, Murdoch was not even the only person at the top responsible. Fox has a board which oversees its CEO, at least in theory, and one of the top blue chip members is former Speaker Paul Ryan, who told Rupert and Lachlan Murdoch, the bosses, that Fox News should not be spreading those conspiracy theories. But the lies apparently rated, and while I told you Murdoch is wily, he still is admitting things under oath. He admits that the truth gave way to that pressure of Trump's large following, who were mostly Fox viewers, and it would have been stupid, he argued, to antagonize them with the truth about Trump's loss as the weeks went on. Fox also has executives discussing a profit motive. That's Murdoch's defense, for example, in the specific case of letting a known liar back on the air, Mike Lindell.
I've been all in trying to find the machine fraud, and we found it. We have all the evidence. I have the evidence. I dare people to put it on. I dare Dominion to sue me because then it would get out faster.
He dared Dominion to sue. Ta-da! That's what they did, suing the more powerful and important platform on which he spewed those lies and that now poorly aging dare. Dominion suing Fox. They also, around the same interview, show that Tucker Carlson and his team knew Lindell's claims about Dominion were false in advance. And Murdoch would go on to chide Carlson, again, new from the case, saying it was actually, quote, wrong for Tucker to host Mike Lindell and repeat those allegations against Dominion. Some of these receipts go all the way to the top. And as I've mentioned just about every time we cover this story, there is freedom of speech in America, and under our laws, there is a constitutional right to speech. There's no right to maliciously lie or fan an insurrection, or to pretend the First Amendment is a total bar and blanket against any consequences after you exercise your freedom of speech. This ain't kindergarten, but yes, actions have consequences. We all learn that sooner or later, one way or another. So we're watching here something pretty significant, a potential legal road to a reckoning that many people feel is long overdue. And I promise you, when I say that, I'm talking about truth, justice, and accountability. I'm not talking about using the courts and tit for tat for political disputes. Settle your politics with debate and voting. And no one who cares about the First Amendment thinks the courts should be misused to go after someone's actual ideas and opinions. Fox News has every right to share all of those. I'll defend that whether people like it or not. We're talking about a time of polarized politics, blatant, habitual, systemic lying, and right-wing violence. And it's all tied together in these lies. That's the accountability part. The other thing that's interesting, because we tell you the news here, and some of it's just interesting stories, true stories, is that we're getting a rare, deeply reported, fact-checked, under oath look inside parts of this influential right-wing empire. A place where Rupert Murdoch, with over basically 60 years experience in the game, this 91-year-old political media titan, is now selling this defense where he's trying to get everyone to focus on that one call that I showed you, where they were right about Trump losing Arizona. As he says, as he testified, he told Team Trump under pressure, the numbers are the numbers. Now, that's supposed to be a defense tonight. And let me tell you this before I bring in our experts. It's actually kind of incriminating. Because it shows Rupert Murdoch knew from the start the numbers were the numbers were the facts, the numbers were solid. And that means he and all of those people we showed you here and that are in the filing at Fox, they were wrong to chuck the numbers later for lies. Now, Rupert Murdoch is a survivor. We've never underestimated him here on The Beat in the way we cover how he moves. He thinks this is his best play right now. He also has lived a life in politics and business where just about everything is negotiable to him. As another student of politics once explained, most deaf, numbers is hard and real, and they never have feelings. But you push too hard, even numbers got limits. Why did one straw break the camel's back? Here's the secret. The million other straws underneath it. A pile of lies finally possibly catching up with Fox. Whether it breaks the camel's back for $1 billion is actually the next question in this high-stakes case.
It is Wednesday, the 1st of March of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid us of these meddlesome priests? Will no one? How are you? Well, we move apace in the what we like to call the Nazi takeover of the United States of America. Man, that James Comer is starting to get on my nerves, even more than he has been. How dare you go after Bo? I just, these unfeeling ghouls, they're soulless. Soulless ghouls. I don't know. You think of the abject corruption of the Trump kids. Look, their family in general. Not all of them, of course. But, you know, that immediate Donald Trump family. How corrupt they are. And have been adjudicated so many times in court. And yet, a public servant like Joe Biden, long time, had a tragic experience in losing his wife and daughter in a car wreck, nursing his 2 boys back to health. And yet, he's the criminal. Why is it that the right wing always goes after the most empathetic as being the most criminal? Is it because those with the least empathy are the most criminal and they always project? They will always turn their weaknesses and judgment of those weaknesses onto others. You know, we've mentioned this before. These criminals think that everybody is a criminal like them. Of course, we like to give people the benefit of the doubt. People aren't all criminals. Of course they are not. But we do. We give people the benefit of the doubt. Burn me once. Shame on you. Burn me twice. So we got Comer out there saying, "Oh, it's just so sad that Bo was never indicted." For what? The FCC had already looked into all of these campaign donations and where they came from. But that's not good enough for them. Oh no, everything's fake. If it doesn't turn out the way we want it, then it's not real. Got an anniversary, though. Isn't that fun? 30 years. The Branch Davidians. They're getting their yearly salutation. Hi there. We're so sorry this happened to you. And I guess, maybe we are. But there was a lot of BS going on that time in our history with the order. All sorts of weird Christian nationalist, anti-government types like the Branch Davidians amassing massive amounts of armaments. Let's also not forget the allegations of child sex abuse, which brought the feds there to begin with. They didn't just show up because they were going to charge him with gun charges. There had been lots and lots of complaints, not only from people inside that, was it a religion? Cult? We'll call it a cult. But also from members of the surrounding community that had to put up with him. Please. So it looks like I've got Scott Horton. He's a libertarian radio broadcaster. He does things over on Pacifica. I guess I got he and his libertarian listeners mad. They're mad at me. Because, of course, here we are lauding the Branch Davidians. Oh, the FBI killed some innocents, 6 innocents. Defensive fire. And I just brought up that I don't really remember anybody saying that the American Indian movement were innocents returning defensive fire. Mr. Horton said, "Oh, what are you talking about? People defend AIM all the time." Yeah, but does CBS, does CNN, does MSNBC, does NBC, does ABC, does NPR? Please. Leonard Peltier is still in jail. And there are no hagiographies saturating the airwaves on any cable shows, any of the major media, or, maybe few of the minor media. But there's no hagiographies for Leonard Peltier every year like there is for the Branch Davidians. Please. Anti-government Christian nationalists. You know, we had an experience here in Oregon with cults taking over, or a cult taking over municipality and wreaking havoc on the state level as well, and that was the Rajneeshis. They went as far as to use bioweapons, put E. coli in the salad bar at the local Sizzler. So they could get people to vote the way they want them to vote, and if people are too sick to vote, well then guess what? So we had great experience with that. Okay? I don't remember anybody anywhere giving a laudatory nod to the Rajneeshis for their, well, decidedly anti-government, or at least anti-democratic slant on government. All right, so there's that. Well, Scott Horton is a libertarian, and I know that he's anti-war. That's great. That's great. Well, as far as I know, libertarians don't want to spend money on anything. Not if they have to pool it. Jeez. So, right there, I'm sorry. I'm not a libertarian. Libertarians are not liberals. And that's just too bad, Mr. Horton, because old David Koresh was was a loon, all right? I'm sorry that happened the way it happened. I think that, maybe some other more diplomatic efforts could have been made, and I know they were. But let's not kid ourselves. This cult was moving into a militant stance. And the federal government was never slow to act if a like group happened to be black or any minority. Let us be clear about that. I think I'm just sort of upset that somebody like David Koresh gets lauded and Leonard Peltier is forgotten. That was the point I was trying to make. And we have some other points to make because we have a curated show for you today, and we had quite a long build-up there with Ari at the beginning, explaining about, how Fox News created a monster of listeners, and now that monster could turn on them, and they just don't want to tell them the truth because they won't be drowned in the creek by accident, okay? That monster doesn't do anything by accident. So no wonder they're afraid. All right. And I suppose also old Rupert can say, hey, we were just trying to make a profit here. This wasn't personal. It was business. All right. They're a mob organization. I've been telling people that for a long time. I wish they would listen. On the rest of the menu here, as we begin in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, troops who refuse the COVID vaccine still may face military discipline. And well, they should. Federal officials sued a Louisiana chemical company over cancer risks to a nearby minority area. And a settlement of more than $1 million was approved in a class action lawsuit over a federal immigration raid at an eastern Tennessee meat packing plant. After the break, we move to the chef's table where a French court dismissed a Uganda environmental lawsuit against Total Energies. And Russian government officials will be banned from using most foreign words when carrying out their duties. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so. If you out there in radio listening land would take a gander now to the left from that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, over there to the left is the link to our Patreon page. And once again, if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and maybe if you could afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso type coffee drink once a month, it really does help us pay our bills and offset the recent outlay of monies in which to upgrade the hardware here. Had to get a new MacBook Pro so we can broadcast this powerhouse of resistance. And truly, we would be unable to do it without you. And thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those, and thank you, Tom. You could also follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable at Justice Putnam. I incidentally post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime, so you can have access to the actual reportage as it was actually reported. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. Alrighty. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, and just so you know, it's not anything untoward. It only refers to a lovely egg dish with a velvety hollandaise sauce, okay? And also the movie Beckett, where we need to get rid of the meddlesome priest, but we do it plural here because are we in big trouble? There's a lot of them. Okay, Lolita C. Baldor of the Associated Press brings us this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The military services are still reviewing possible discipline of troops who refused the order to get the COVID-19 vaccine, defense officials told Congress yesterday, Tuesday, and they provided few details on how many of those who were forced out of the military would like to return. Lawmakers expressed frustration with the news, questioning why service members should still face discipline since the vaccine requirement had been rescinded. Gilbert Cisneros, Jr., Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel, told the House Armed Services Personnel Subcommittee that some service members who disobeyed the lawful order to get the vaccine and did not seek any type of exemption were still going through the review process. In order to maintain good order and discipline, it is very important that our service members go and follow orders when they are lawful, said Cisneros, adding that military services were going through each case to evaluate what should be done. The vaccine mandate divided Americans and has remained a contentious political issue, and I wonder why. Because anti-vaxxers had a platform in which to spew their lies, their disinformation, their anti-science, for one purpose only, and that is to disrupt the American way of life. And who would want to do that? What hostile foreign power would want to do that? Well, we can think of a couple. The Pentagon formally dropped the mandate in January as a result of legislation signed into law in late December, but a number of discipline cases were pending when the requirement was rescinded. Cisneros and top officials from the Army, Navy, and Air Force told the subcommittee that in some cases, troops may have committed other misconduct in addition to the vaccine refusal, so each case was being reviewed. "What's the point?" said Representative Jim Banks, repug from Indiana, who happens to be the subcommittee chairman. "We rescinded the mandate. What's the point of continuing to review the cases?" "Because it's not retroactive, you stoop." In this reporter's opinion, of course, let us return to the article at hand. Banks said that a number of lawmakers were infuriated by the double standard and message you send for rescinding a policy and still punishing them for not taking the vaccine. They were supposed to take the vaccine when people were dying, dropping dead right in the streets. Ugh. 1 million people dead, and they totally want to memory hole that. Why? Is it because they partied in Moscow on the 4th of July? I wonder. Lawmakers also pressed the defense officials on whether troops who were discharged were being allowed to return to service. I think it's a little misleading when they say lawmakers. I think it's the Republicans on the subcommittee who dominated these questions, at least in this reportage. Now, Eric Raven, the Navy Undersecretary, was the only one who provided any estimate, saying that we've had single digits in terms of numbers of individuals who have explored the option of returning to service. It wasn't clear if those individuals had formally sought reenlistment or merely asked about it. Raven, along with Gina Ortiz-Jones, the Air Force Undersecretary, and Gabe Camarillo, the Army Undersecretary, all told lawmakers that service members can go through the regular process for reinstatement. In most cases, they will need to go through a review board to have their discharge status changed, and then they can seek to reenlist. Now, according to data compiled by the military, as of late last year, the Marine Corps led the services with 3,717 Marines discharged for refusing to follow the vaccine order. Now, remember, they have to get the polio vaccine, MERS, any number of vaccines, rubella. But for some reason, we were in a pandemic where 1 million people died, and we have a party who wants to pretend it never happened. So 3,717 Marines discharged. 2,041 were discharged from the Navy. 1,841 from the Army. And 834 from the Air Force. And the Air Force data includes the Space Force. Michael Phyllis and Matthew Daly of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Federal officials sued a Louisiana chemical maker, alleging that it presents an unacceptable cancer risk to the nearby majority black community, and demanded cuts in toxic emissions. Danka Performance Elastomer, LLC, makes synthetic rubber emitting the carcinogen chloroprene and other chemicals in such high concentrations that it poses an unacceptable cancer risk, according to the federal complaint. Children are particularly vulnerable. There is an elementary school a half-mile from the plant. The former DuPont plant has reduced its emissions over time, but the Justice Department, suing on behalf of the EPA, said the plant still represents an imminent and substantial endangerment to public health and welfare, including elevated cancer risks. The company has not moved far enough or fast enough to reduce emissions or ensure the safety of the surrounding community, EPA Administrator Michael Regan said in a statement. Denka, a Japanese company that bought the rubber-making plant in 2015, did not immediately respond to messages seeking comment. A company spokesperson said in September that advocates described a crisis that simply does not exist. Denka's facility makes neoprene, a flexible synthetic rubber used to produce common goods such as wetsuits, laptop sleeves, orthopedic braces, and automotive belts and hoses. Chloroprene is a liquid raw material used to produce neoprene and is emitted into the air from various areas at the facility. Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta said every community, no matter its demographics, should be able to breathe clean air and drink clean water. Our suit aims to stop Denka's dangerous pollution, she said in a statement. Associated Press staff brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A federal judge has approved a settlement of more than $1 million in a class action lawsuit that challenged a federal immigration raid at an eastern Tennessee meatpacking plant where about 100 people were arrested. The settlement, approved by U.S. District Judge Travis McDonough on Monday, calls for the U.S. government to pay $475,000 to 6 individual plaintiffs and an additional $550,000 to a class settlement fund for nearly 100 workers detained almost 5 years ago. The lawsuit claimed the Southeastern Provision workers' 4th and 5th Amendment constitutional rights were violated in April of 2018 when armed officers raided the Bean Station plant using racial slurs, shoving guns in their faces, and punching one worker in the face. It also alleged that officers did not know workers' identities or immigration statuses, only that many were Hispanic. White workers at the plant, meanwhile, were not accosted, detained, searched, or arrested, and many stood outside smoking during the raid. During the raid, officers were helping to execute an IRS search warrant for financial documents related to James Brantley, the plant's owner. Agents did not have arrest warrants for any of the workers, only to search the business for tax violations, according to the lawsuit. Brantley later pleaded guilty to federal charges of employing unauthorized immigrants, tax evasion, and wire fraud. Today, justice was served to the Latinx workers and their community who took a stand against federal agents targeting them because of their ethnicity, said Meredith Stewart, senior supervising attorney with the Southern Poverty Law Center's Immigrant Justice Project. The unprecedented court-approved settlement demonstrates that we, as a nation, will not tolerate racial profiling. Well, good. All right, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, A Tale of Two Marvels. First, the tagline for 1978's Superman was, "You'll believe a man can fly." And it took a crew of special effects people doing blue screen compositing, front projection, rigs and wires, and even a specially designed dual-focusing camera process that allowed them to zoom into Christopher Reeve while zooming out simultaneously from his background to make it seem like he was flying towards you. It looked great in '78, and the film won a Special Achievement Academy Award for special effects. 45 years later, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania makes that film magic seem like shadow puppets. Read Anthony Bresnikan's Vanity Fair article about how these people conceived the quantum world. Production designer Will Hittay basically said, "Whatever we can imagine, we will make happen." And I cannot stress how amazing the design of this film is. It's insane, the seamless blend of CGI, models, wacky sets, and the work of half a dozen special effects companies, all bringing you a gangbang love child of Star Wars, Dune, and Flash Gordon, pumped full of steroids and LSD, and exploded on Pym growth particles onto the big screen. Second, I just rewatched 2021's Eternals, and I still like it, but it left me uneasy. In Eternals, our heroes chose Earth while dooming planets of unseen and unknowable beings to non-existence. In Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, our immediate familial and social relations are worth the suffering and death of distant billions. If our failures to address our ongoing climate apocalypse and the global pandemic show us anything, it's that these priorities are certainly human, or maybe just certainly American. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania does the same thing, and again, I remained entertained and uneasy. While that moral framework may make us heroes to the loved ones we've saved, what does it make us to those we've chosen not to? This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
If you came across someone struggling with hunger, how would you recognize them? By their clothes, their age, the way they speak? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a single father of 2 who works 3
part-time jobs and still can't put enough food on the table?
Or maybe a mother who cleans offices at night,
hoping to find meeting leftovers to take home to her hungry family.
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time landing
a job and getting back on his feet.
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. People you pass by every day but never knew were hungry. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America, 200 Food Banks Strong, and the Ad Council.
Victor deployed for the first time to Afghanistan in 2003. At 4 a.m, my phone rang. They said, "I regret to inform you that your husband was wounded in action." Victor sustained a moderate traumatic brain injury. I was doing school full-time, and I was also then caring for Victor. One of the most important elements of caregiving is taking care of yourself. I just didn't want to forget that I also had goals and that I also had a life. What I did is I challenged Victor to meet me halfway. There are almost 6 million military and veteran caregivers across the nation. We have our own journey, and we can fulfill that journey at the same time that we are helping our loved one.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for a free military veterans guide to navigate your caregiving journey and better care for your loved one and yourself. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
I was in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when it happened. there was a sudden jolt and our submarine crashed on the seafloor. We were in total darkness.
That's Dr. Dejana Figueroa, a marine biologist and STEM teacher, talking about a deep sea dive she'll never forget.
It's funny, when I was a kid, I was afraid of the ocean, and there I was, 2 miles below the surface. But as a scientist, you prepare for that. Using our training and a little creativity, we fixed the sub and finished our experiments. The dive was just too important. Every dive gives us glimpses at things few people ever get to see. Glowing creatures, fiery undersea volcanoes. When we got back to the surface, I kissed the ground and called my mom, of course. But you know what? I wouldn't trade that dive for anything.
Dr. Figueroa uses her passion for STEM to discover new things and make the world a better place. She can STEM, so can you. Check out She Can STEM for more stories and inspiration. A message from the Ad Council.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When it snows this winter, make sure you clear more than your driveway. Before you hit the road and before you get in the driver's seat, check to be sure that your vehicle's tailpipe is clear of snow. If the tailpipe is blocked, carbon monoxide, an odorless, colorless, and deadly gas produced by your engine can build up quickly inside your vehicle, poisoning anyone inside. To learn more, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-232-4636.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Change the Pledge of Allegiance? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The original pledge, written by Socialist Minister Ralph Bellamy in 1892, was, I pledge allegiance to my flag, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In the 1920s, the words, the flag of the United States of America, were substituted for my flag, a minor tinker. Then, in 1954, at President Eisenhower's urging, in order to combat godless communism, Congress inserted the words, under God, into the pledge. One nation under God, not a minor tinker. In the early 2000s, the majority of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the words under God were unconstitutional, just as the words under Zeus, or under no God, or under Jesus would have been. However, in 2004, the Supreme Court preserved under God in the pledge by ruling that the father who had brought the case for his elementary school daughter lacked legal standing because the student's mother got sole legal custody in the divorce. The issue of under God in the pledge has not been back to the Supreme Court since. Alfred T. Goodwin, the federal judge who wrote the appeals court opinion that ruled the pledge unconstitutional, died last December 27th at the age of 99. Judge Goodwin will be remembered as a jurist who stood up for principle. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1900. That was the day the members of the Granite Cutters National Union walked out on strike. Their demands were improved wages and the 8-hour day. The leader of the strike was James Duncan, a Scottish granite cutter. Duncan had been elected granite cutter president in 1885. He was one of the founders of the American Federation of Labor. He served on the AFL's executive committee and was a close personal advisor of AFL President Samuel Gompers. Most of the granite cutters were located in cities on the East Coast. The union's first local was founded in Maine in 1877. Like many skilled trade unions of its day, under Duncan's leadership, the organization did not welcome black members. Duncan actively encouraged employers in the South to hire only white granite cutters. The strike of 1900 lasted until mid-May. It ended with a victory for the union, including the 8-hour workday for every local of granite cutters. Because their skills were often in high demand, tradecraft unions were sometimes able to win concessions from employers on matters of wages, hours, and working conditions. These victories by skilled craftsmen helped pave the way for the 8-hour workday to become the standard workday for all working people in the United States. The union also won a minimum wage standard and grievance procedure. In 1905, the Granite Cutters changed their name to the Granite Cutters International Union. During the 20th century, changes in technology changed the labor of granite cutting. Machines reduced the number of workers. In the 1920s, the union had more than 10,000 members. But by the late 1970s, it had dropped to less than 4,000 members. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 30 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the mid-40s, partly cloudy throughout the day, and winds will be light and variable. Looks like we'll have a bit of a drying out. Partly cloudy skies tonight will give way to cloudy skies late. Lows will be in the low to mid-20s, winds light and variable. And then tomorrow, cloudy with occasional showers. Highs in the low 40s, winds light and variable. And it looks like we're going to get something less than a quarter inch of rain. And then beginning on Friday, looks like we'll have a mix of rain and snow continuing through the weekend. And the forecast is for all of next week as well. Pollen is rated as none right outside the window here in the little village of Rogue River. The air quality index for the Rogue River Valley region is good at 38 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is in that moderate range at level 3. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.1 inches. Visibility is up to 8 miles. And relative humidity is at 92%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 46 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 44 and sunny. Rome is 54 degrees and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 35 and cloudy. Kabul is 41 with light rain. Hong Kong is 65 and fair. Tokyo is 58 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 72 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 42 degrees, sunny with a small craft advisory on the bay and offshore. And New York, New York is 43 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Erica Hernandez of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. A French civil court yesterday, Tuesday, dismissed a fast-track lawsuit brought by campaigners against energy major Total Energies over its oil projects in Uganda and Tanzania, saying the case should be examined in depth in a standard trial. Under the suit filed in 2019, 6 French and Ugandan activist groups had accused the company of failing to protect people and the environment from the Telenga oil development and the $3.5 billion East African crude oil pipeline. The campaigners wanted the court to order Total Energies to halt the East African projects, basing their case on a 2017 duty of vigilance French law that requires companies to identify human rights and environmental risks in their global operations and supply chains and to take measures to prevent them. The Paris Civil Court dismissed the request, saying that only a judge examining the case more in depth could assess whether the accusations against Total Energies were founded, and then proceed to an audit of operations on the ground. Total Energies, in a statement, said the court had found that the company had established a so-called vigilance plan comprising the 5 items required by the duty of vigilance law in sufficient detail so as not to be considered purely summary. In its ruling, the first based on the 2017 law, the court said that nothing prevented France from enacting laws that govern the overseas activities of companies present in France. A point legal experts said set an important precedent if applied in cases going forward. Other French multinationals, including nuclear giant EDF, water supplier Suez, bank BNP Paribas, and agri-food firm Danone, have been sued under the 2017 law. Those cases center on claims as diverse as plastics pollution, working conditions in France and overseas, loans to companies contributing to deforestation, and land clashes with indigenous populations on construction of new projects. The companies deny wrongdoing. Friends of the Earth France said they reserve their right to further legal action. The group can refile the suit as a standard trial rather than the emergency fast-track procedure that was the basis of yesterday's ruling.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Staff at Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Russian government officials will be banned from using most foreign words when carrying out their duties, according to an amended law on the formal use of Russian that President Vladimir Putin signed yesterday, Tuesday. Since launching the invasion of Ukraine a year ago, Putin has said he wants to protect Russia from what he calls a degenerate West that he alleges is trying to destroy the country. The amendments to the 2005 law are designed to protect and support the status of Russian, according to a text posted on the government's website. When using Russian as the state language of the Russian Federation, it is not allowed to use words and expressions that do not correspond to the norms of modern Russian, with the exception of foreign words which do not have widely used corresponding equivalents in Russian, says the text. I wonder if they mean like groovy and wowie zowie. A list of foreign words that can still be used will be published separately. The amendments do not mention any punishments for those who fail to respect the updated law. That brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.